Hey, welcome to another Coffin Report. I'm Patrick Coffin. Lots going on. Let's start with the hero. My man, my spiritual father, and in a way, my idol. Archbishop Fulton John Sheen is the hero right off the bat. Uncle Fulty, as he was called. He was nicknamed Uncle Fulty because he was up against Milton Berle in the early 50s on Tuesday nights. Sometimes it was Frank Sinatra, but mostly his competitor was Milton Berle, who was known on TV as Uncle Milty, hence Uncle Fulty. So when Uncle Fulton Sheen won an Emmy Award, he very wittily thanked his writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Milton Berle gently ribbed him because he didn't win the Emmy, and he said, Bishop Sheen, he works off old material. So that was back when a Catholic bishop could hobnob with A-list celebrities in the television Hollywood world as friends and as respected colleagues. Those days are over. I wanted to show you a couple of things. Oh, by the way, why is Uncle Fulty a hero? Well, as this week's Patrick Coffin Show guest, Bonnie Engstrom, demonstrates in her amazing story of Bishop Sheen's intercession on behalf of her late son. Well, now that has an asterisk next to it. Her late son, James Fulton Engstrom, who was born deceased because of a umbilical cord mishap during the time of delivery. He had a strangulation event that involved a true knot in the umbilical cord, and he was born dead. Not to put too fine a point on it. The baby was whisked away. They couldn't get a life lift helicopter ride to the hospital, so they had to wait for EMTs and the ambulance. 18-minute drive, just full of anxiety. Baby, sort of terrible ash and blue color. And the baby, sweet baby James Fulton, stayed dead for 61 minutes until the powerful intercession of this man prayed to, asked his prayers in a consistent, focused, intentional manner, despite all odds and in the face of a medical impossibility. James Fulton Engstrom turned pink, his heart began to quicken, and then they stormed heaven asking for Bishop Sheen's help in the baby's health in the area of brain damage. Now, an infant's brain is so delicate that, 5 minutes without oxygen, just that terrible oxygen deprivation would normally cause catastrophic organ and brain damage. Well, the little guy's running around. He's over 8 years old now, and if you listen to my interview with Bonnie, his mother, this will be the miracle that makes Bishop Sheen go from Venerable Fulton Sheen to Blessed Fulton Sheen on the way to sainthood. So I also credit Bishop Sheen's intercession from heaven for the breaking of the logjam with respect to the moving of his remains from New York City, where his remains sit beneath the high altar of St. Patrick's, back to his home diocese of Peoria, Illinois. Peoria is where he grew up. He was actually, he was born in El Paso, Illinois, but he was first incarnated as a priest, ordained there in the beautiful St. Mary's Cathedral in Peoria, which I would love to get to. His 100th anniversary is coming up in the fall, and I just hope and pray I can have some involvement in that great liminal event in the life of the church in this country. Thanks to the great Bishop Sheen. There he is holding the NBC microphone. He was on a show on NBC called The Catholic Hour for 20 years before he stepped onto the boards of the Adelphi Theater in New York City in 1951, when Life is Worth Living first debuted. And that stayed on the air for over 10 years. I believe he won 2 Emmys in total, until it all came crumbling down after a dispute with his then boss, Cardinal Spellman. That's another story for another day. But Spellman's spiritual ancestor, Timothy Cardinal Dolan, has been holding up the remains along with his pack of lawyers in New York for many years. This has gone to courts and appellate courts, all the way up to the final decision where, look, the family, in the person of Mrs. Joan Cunningham, who's 88 years old, I think now, as I deliver this Coffin Report. She's the only living relative of Bishop Sheen, and she was arguing, look, he needs to come home where he was, even though his will stipulated that he be buried in Queens at Our Lady of Calvary Cemetery. One of the judges said the New York's cause or its case, its argument is fallacious because it proves too much. He shouldn't have ever been at St. Pat's Cathedral because that's not what he wished. So because Bishop Sheen was a famously humble person, never anticipated he was going to be a candidate for sainthood, it's fitting that he go back to Peoria. And thanks be to God, he's going back, at least his mortal remains are. And I think that's a very good news. I've always been a little troubled and confused as to why the New York Archdiocese never picked up the baton to investigate this great man's sainthood cause. Why has it always been the bishops of Peoria, now in the person of the Bishop of Daniel Jenke, who's a Holy Cross father before he became a bishop? So the Peoria Diocese did all the heavy lifting. They paid out all the money. They hired the experts. They did all of the work to get him through the various stages, starting with servant of God and now venerable. And soon, please God, we will have a blessed Fulton J. Sheen. That will be a great day in the life of the church. He will join two other blesseds who were American-born males. One, Blessed Stanley Rother of Okartha, Kansas, and the other one is Venerable Solanus Casey, who was born in Wisconsin, spent most of his life in New York, and also in Michigan, in the Detroit area. So that's really good news. So that's why Uncle Fulty is our hero. I found some interesting photos you probably have never seen of Bishop Sheen. I wanted to share this with you one by one. A lot of them are photos of him taken when he was young, when he was a Monsignor studying in Louvain in Belgium. Here he is praying before he exits the door here on this side of the camera onto his set of Life is Worth Living in New York City, recollecting himself there. There's the young Bishop Sheen after ordination. This is in probably the early 1920s, before he traveled to Louvain. There he is when he was older. I believe that's when he was the head of the National Association of the Propagation for the Faith, a little bit older there. This is the famous moment when in 1979, which is the year John Paul II came to America first, and also it's the year that Bishop Sheen went into eternity, the St. Patrick's Cathedral was flooded with tears at this moment. Bishop Sheen was downstairs. He didn't want to take attention away from his hero, John Paul II, about whom he wrote incredible things in his last book, which was published posthumously, his autobiography called Treasure and Clay. It's a great book. In fact, I'll put the link to that book in the show notes. And the late, great Father Andrew Apostoli told me that the Pope was looking for Bishop Sheen because he listened to many Sheen tapes when he was in Poland. When he was perfecting English as an orator, he would listen to Bishop Sheen to help with the proper cadence and delivery of the English language. And if you listen to John Paul II speak in English allocutions and homilies, and if you're familiar with the way Bishop Sheen spoke in his many hundreds of wonderful talks, you can definitely see the similarity. There is a sense of pacing and kind of a gravitas in the delivery. Both men spoke with great power. Both had very masculine voices. You could not listen to John Paul II and his spiritual brother and, God willing, future saint, Fulton John Sheen. That's the moment when Bishop Sheen tried to kind of bend down and kiss the Holy Father's ring, and he grabbed him into himself, into his chest, and brought him up in that embrace there. Bishop Sheen has removed his zucchetto, the yarmulke that archbishops wear. Beautiful moment. Beautiful moment. I'll show you one more. Is that awesome or what? I found this picture of Bishop Sheen on one of his many, many travels. I think this is after a long marathon of doom overseas. He had to sit with his boss, Cardinal Spellman, for I think it was, these 20-hour days, day after day after day, in many, many countries. But I thought you'd like to see that. Technically, I don't think that is a fedora. It looks more like a Stetson, but not a cowboy Stetson. I'd have to look that up. But it's close enough for jazz. And you can definitely see the resemblance with yours truly. I certainly can. I'd love to hear your comments about the possibility of me developing a one-man show, a one-man play in New York on Broadway about Bishop Sheen. There's so many different ways to tell his story, and I think with the mortal remains leaving New York and his canonization cause possibly being open, I think that was the logjam that was holding up Rome's approach with Bishop Sheen's cause. So, something to pray for. Okay, there is an upcoming Pan-Amazonian region synod, because we have to have synods every 45 minutes now in the Catholic Church. It's happening October 6th through the 27th. And here's the Holy Father with some headgear on and some Pan-Amazonian individuals. There's a working document. It's called the Instrumentum Laboris. It's a very fancy, extraordinary title, yes. This working document is a kind of guide to this special assembly of the Synod of Bishops of the Pan-Amazonian region. And I took the time to do a couple of keyword searches in this very large document. I'll give you a couple of quotes here. Let me see. The working document, which calls for a church with an indigenous face. I don't know if that's what they had in mind. This is an Amazonian, Peruvian, East warrior Indian. I don't know the tribe. I want to say the word meow, but I don't want to be disrespectful to their customs. It's never defined what church with an indigenous face means, but what's expected to be on the table for discussion is to make an exception to what St. Paul VI called the inestimable gift of celibacy. There's going to be a hard push at the synod to allow married men, in Latin viri probati, so mature married men, something similar to permanent deacons. There's going to be a push in these remote areas to ordain married men to the Catholic priesthood. Now, what this is going to accomplish, I'm not really sure. I think they're going to run into a little thing called the Holy Spirit that's going to prevent this from fully flowering elsewhere. Because as you know, people are going to use what happens in the remotest area of the Pan-Amazonian region, and they're going to want to translate it into, I don't know, suburban Cincinnati. That's what's going to happen. This chipping away, softening the ground for the next innovation. Edward Penton had a little summary on his Twitter feed about the phrases used in this working document. One of them is cosmovision, the cosmovision that's present in the Pope's mantra. The ecology, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook. I've never had to wade through more strange sounding, barely Christian conceptualized verbiage ever. Just astounding. One of the undersecretaries for the Synod of Bishops for this meeting, his name is Monsignor Fabio Fabeni, he highlighted the document's call for new lay ministries. Just when you thought we had enough new lay ministries. No, we need more lay ministries. The altar must be stormed by more lay people. Quote, in this sense, one wonders what official ministry can be conferred to the woman. He continued, the document does not speak of the female diaconate. Listen carefully, since the Pope has already expressed himself on the subject in the Assembly of the Superiors General, declaring that the topic needs further study. Well, actually, it doesn't. The question of female ordination to the diaconate has been settled definitively, and the answer is no, because the diaconate is a participation in the priesthood. It's holy orders, And the female sex is not a fitting material matter, if you will, to use Aristotelian terms, to properly effect and celebrate the sacrament known as the life, the committed life and conformity to Christ known as holy orders. So you cannot have deaconesses. The deaconesses referred to in the New Testament are women helpers, chiefly with things like baptism, where women would be scantily enrobed, otherwise au naturel underneath. And so during baptism rites, it would be fitting for women to help women through that procedure. They were not ordained to the diaconate, as we understand holy orders to be, certainly not as priests. So this is just one more example of endless talking about something on the sidelines. The church is so roiled by scandal and crisis and weaponized ambiguity and uncertainty and misplaced priorities and corruption and lies and deflections and denials. That's this ongoing talk of the role of women in the priesthood and the diaconate and lay ministries. It just gets a little tired in light of the very pressing things that Catholics who take their baptismal call seriously are concerned about. How to keep their kids in the church. What about the families of young people who are threatened by at all sides in college campuses, especially Catholic college campuses? Why aren't we being accompanied by church leadership? We're kind of the peripheries now, if you think about it. With all the crazy things being thrown at us by the culture, the people who are trying to toe the line, who are in many ways white-knuckling it and not leaving the church, we're the ones out there swinging for the fences, doing our best. And these things, frankly, are wastes of time. This is not really going to go anywhere. Here's paragraph 143. The church cannot but worry about the integral salvation of the human person, which involves promoting the culture of indigenous peoples, talking about their vital needs, accompanying movements, and joining forces to defend their rights. It goes on to recommend that Catholics in the region, quote, join the basic social movements to prophetically announce a program of agrarian justice that promotes a profound agrarian reform, supporting farming, organic, and agroforestry. This is a church document. This is a pan-Amazonian synod of bishops that's going to have the heavy input and certainly the moral support of Pope Francis. And incidentally, since this is happening in the Amazon, and the Amazon is not too far inland and upward from his home and native land of Argentina, do you find it a little odd, as I do, that Pope Francis, in going on 7 years, has never visited Argentina? He's been to Colombia, he's been to Peru. It's odd. Ecuador? Never once has he gone back to his home country. John Paul II went back to Poland more than once. Same with Pope Benedict to Germany. Just find it a little odd. A little odd. I took the time to do a keyword search here of the word count. It's 42,000 words. This is the working document for the Pan-Amazonian Region Synod next October. 42,750 words. And then I looked up the name of, what's his name, from Nazareth, carpenter, Jewish on his mother's side, divine, Jesus. I did a keyword search, and there are 19 references to Jesus in 42,750 words. I included the footnotes, by the way. That works out to the total percentage of Jesus mentions in this document, 0.044444. That is a tiny sliver. It's less than 1/2 of 1% of a document that ostensibly is a magisterium of the Catholic Church document. I don't know how to explain this, how these things happen. Maybe I just lack the right cosmovision goggles. I don't know. But this is where we're at, and I don't expect anything but more weaponized ambiguity, and the same cast of characters wanting to push the same tired boomer-era national Catholic reporter agenda. Okay, so let's move on with the Coffin Report. There's the church with an indigenous face. And by the way, we're Catholic. Before we move on, one last note here. Catholic means of the whole, or universal. Kataholikos means of the whole. In other words, it's a description of what yeast does in dough. It goes all the way through. It doesn't just stay in a cube in the corner. You knead it, and it bakes and distributes itself. It suffuses the whole of the dough. That's what the Catholic Church is. The Catholic Church is the church that suffuses itself all around the world in every culture. Now, Jesus Christ is above culture because he's God, but because he's also man, and the church is a human institution as well as having a divine foundation, there's an enculturation. There are legitimate forms of enculturation of the gospel because we believe in the incarnational principle. But this ambiguity, the church with an indigenous face, we don't ask for a church with a white face or an Asian face or a black face or an Aboriginal face or a Swedish face or an Irish face. So why is there this call for a church with an indigenous face? Weren't the white fathers, so-called, the Holy Ghost fathers from Ireland, didn't they do a fantastic job evangelizing Africa? Don't the African priests who were evangelized because of the white fathers in Ireland, don't they do a fantastic job of going back to missionary territories like Ireland to bring the gospel? See, skin color has nothing to do with this. So we literally don't need to have a church with an indigenous face. If there are indigenous priests, great. We have Korean priests, we have Inuit priests, we have French priests, we even have American priests. So it's important that God calls people from all over, men to the priesthood, and everyone to the life of holiness. But this kind of SJW-ish insistence on politically correct categories, it just gets a little old. Have you noticed the papal logos? I hate to keep harping on this, but every new event that comes along that has to do with the Pope or the Vatican, there are these super kind of floppy, they look like 1980s era, badly designed stained glass window designs here, right? And subliminally rainbowish. A lot of rainbow stuff going on here with these. You got the United Arab Emirates visit. You've got the Mercy and Compassion, the Philippines visit, the Santiago. It's just all. There's the on the lower right, love is our mission. There's the Pope. Looks like he's like waving at a city. I don't know. That was his American visit. Bad art. It reminds me of the bad art that has helped destroy devotion to St. Joseph. St. Joseph was not a 99-year-old man with a cane and a flower walking around hobbling, okay? St. Joseph would have been younger than that. As Bishop Sheen once pointed out, he was virile, young, strong. Think of it. God appointed him to take care of the most beautiful woman in the world and his own divine son. So St. Joseph would have had some menace to him. Think Russell Crowe. Think Jason Statham. Think, there's not a lot of younger contemporary masculine figures. Russell Crowe's a good example. So bad art. I mean, art is a vehicle, or should be, of beauty. There should be an evangelical power to art. But this kind of schlocky, well-meaning stuff, it's like well-intentioned adults trying to be hip and cool to the youths. All right. United States bishops, they met in Baltimore, and they had some resolutions, and these guys, they just look like they're wondering what time lunch is. There's not a lot of action coming from the U.S. bishops. They gathered for their spring General Assembly, and they talked about promulgating the motu proprio called Vos Estis Lux Mundi, this is the light of the world. I don't know what to tell you. The directives were approved 218-1. One of the joint statements that they approved is called "Affirming Our Episcopal Commitments." Two interventions, two talks that caught my attention. One is from Bishop Sean McKnight of Jefferson City. He said that mandatory lay involvement is essential, quote, to make darn sure we bishops do not harm the church, unquote, in the ways most recently seen in the crisis. That was an important thing for him to say. Look, we need lay involvement here. What's the implicit admission? The implicit admission is that bishops are not trusted by Catholic lay people. They're not seen by Catholic lay people who take their faith seriously as a body of leaders they can trust, because nothing changes unless you have one of the two P's, the press or the police. For instance, many dioceses to this day have hotlines. Dial 1-800, I've been diddled, or whatever. Don't want to make light of it. The 800 number sends you to the diocese. Big mistake. That's like going to the Death Star because there's a problem with your spaceship. You have to call the cops. If a priest or a bishop harmed you or knew something bad was going on and did nothing, call the police. Now, some bishops are coming around on this. One of them who really gets it is Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas. Great bishop. I like everything this guy says is full of clarity and power and relevance. He says, and by the way, he was the only bishop to raise this directly. It was the issue of Theodore McCarrick, Uncle Ted, Mr. Ted McCarrick. Unlike Cardinal Pell, whom, as I hope was clear from my interview with Peter Westmore, was physically unable, impossibly accused, is now in a Melbourne prison. Whereas Uncle Ted, who is known to have sexually abused young men and seminarians, and James Grine, who was 11 when his molestation began, so Mr. Grine says, he enjoys 3 squares in beautiful rural Kansas with linen sheets. Only Bishop Strickland brought his name up. Talk about the elephant in the chancery. He insisted that a full reckoning still needed to be made for the former cardinal's career, but that he had been assured that the Holy See is working on that. I'm not sure on what basis an American bishop would have hope or encouragement that he's been assured that the Holy See is working on that, since the Holy See is the one that's been kicking the ball down the avenue further and further with no closure, no guidelines about trimming up and making clear the criteria for entrance in seminaries, and removing people with deep-seated homosexual inclinations that are not suitable for the priesthood. That didn't get brought up at all with this meeting. It just sounds like, let's get together. It's we can chat, we can read this motu proprio, we can talk about self-policing when the Dallas Charter is now, in a way, continued with some slight modifications. Bishops have still accepted themselves, or they have exempted, I should say, themselves from their own rules. So I don't know what's different now. Archbishop Gomez of Los Angeles told the bishops that, quote, the Holy See is aware of the urgency of this matter and commended the passage of the directives to the conference. So all in all, it just sounds like more or less a nothing burger where they congratulate themselves and move on. I wish there were more standout bishops that just stood up and said, enough. Our people don't believe us. For them to, suggest, as I think Bishop Barron did, that they take a note from Jordan Peterson, to reach the nuns. Yeah, we need to reach the nuns. We need to reach everybody. But let's start with the Catholics in the pews. Those are the people in our orbit every Sunday. What about converting the sacramentalized? There's no specific directives to help Catholics who are in the faith to better evangelize the people sitting next to them and in front of them and behind them at Sunday Mass. Nothing except for bromides and platitudes and promises and assurances. In other words, the same old. My little pony, ooh. Isn't My Little Pony, this is my thing, isn't it sort of gay enough with the rainbow pattern everywhere? Well, My Little Pony, according to Huffington Post, is getting an upgrade to a lesbian couple. That's right. Lesbian cartoon horses. Aunt something and Aunt something, I forget, but they're auntie and aunt. Two lesbian My Little Pony characters. They're coming after our children. They're not even hiding it. You had Arthur, the cute little mouse character. There's a character in that series now that's homosexual. Now we have My Little Pony. It's the tentacles of this LGBTQR number 2 thing are sticky and now everywhere. Have you noticed this? You can't look at a television show without seeing a witty, sympathetic homosexual character. It's now the default normal. And I don't think Catholics should use the term gay, nor LGBT as though it's a community. Look what happened when Bishop Tobin of Rhode Island stood up to the mob and reminded Catholics that they are not to participate in Pride Month activities. Also, not only is it injurious to the health of their faith, but it's also dangerous for children. Well, he was shellacked and shamed, and then he kind of double-backed and gave a kind of an amendment statement that was not really an amendment statement. It was very, very, I thought it was a show of weakness. I was disappointed, as I mentioned in the last Coffin Report. Then up in Canada, in Picton, Ontario, in the Archdiocese of Kingston, Father Robert Chisholm made a similar statement in his parish bulletin, and all hell broke loose. There were protests. People showed up with their rainbow flags, full of anger, denouncing this fine priest. His own bishop, Bishop Malal, said that he spoke with the pastor and he regrets any hurt intended. It was inappropriate. There's the word, inappropriate. It's so 1995. He never clarified what was inappropriate about a priest protecting his flock against the mob that want to sell a lifestyle that deals in death-dealing illnesses and greatly reduces your lifespan. So this is where we're at. My Little Pony gets a lesbian couple. The Illinois bishops have some discord. There's a great disagreement in the state of Illinois about how to deal with lawmakers. There are two prominent politicians who are both Catholics. One is the House Speaker, Michael Madigan. The other is the Senate President, John Cullerton, in the state of Illinois. There are two bishops that represent a high contrast. One is this happy-looking Blaise Cardinal Cupich of Chicago. Very much a man of St. Francis's stripe, ilk, agenda, priorities. He does not want to forbid or call to task Catholic politicians who vote for pro-abortion policies. Now, there's a new abortion law in the state, and, they're united. Bishop Cupich calls himself a pro-lifer. He says, I think that our Catholic people are rightly scandalized when they see Catholic politicians not voting for but actively promoting abortion rights, and they wonder, well, how can you promote abortion rights and call yourself a Catholic in good standing? Good question. Bishop Cardinal Cupich says that it would be counterproductive to deny Holy Communion to public obstinate sinners in his archdiocese, to the legislators in this particular case who champion the law. This is a quote he gave to Catholic News Agency. I think it would be counterproductive to impose sanctions simply because they don't change anybody's minds. But it also takes away from the fact that an elected official has to deal with the judgment seat of God, not just the judgment seat of a bishop. I think that's much more powerful. There's another bishop who thinks of things in very different terms. And to the question, how can you promote abortion rights and consider yourself a Catholic in good standing? This bishop, Bishop Thomas Paprocki, says, the answer is you can't. You cannot square that circle. And he made a decision to prohibit, not just recommend, not just say, hey, don't present yourself for Holy Communion. He has forbidden them from receiving Holy Communion. This is the two politicians I mentioned. It's called the Illinois Reproductive Act. It's Senate Bill 25, signed by the state governor, Pritzker, on Wednesday. It recognizes abortion as a fundamental right and mandates that insurance companies cover abortions. Well, Bishop Paprocki of Springfield, Illinois, who, by the way, is also a marathon runner and a hockey goalie, he issued a decree recently on June 5th that because, quote, their leadership roles in promoting the evil of abortion by facilitating the passage of Senate Bill 25, this legislative session and House Bill 40 in 2017, House Speaker Michael Madigan and Senate President John Cullerton have been barred from receiving Holy Communion in the Diocese of Springfield in Illinois. Obstinate, says Bishop Paprocki, means that they're stubborn. They're persisting in this stance, which is completely incoherent as a Catholic believer in Jesus Christ, the Lord of life. The church has been clear on this teaching, he says. They've been repeatedly calling them back to what the church teaches, and they're just digging in. They're not going to change their views. And persistent means that it happens over a period of time. Both bishops say they have communicated and are tried to. Oftentimes the calls are not returned. But Bishop Paprocki understands, he has canon law training himself, that barring a high-profile Catholic from Holy Communion is a very serious matter. It's not excommunication, and it's not done to politicize the Eucharist. It's not done as a external sanction, as you would impose economic sanctions on a country in a time of war or tension or disagreement. It's a medicine of mercy. It's a great act of charity to tell someone who is objectively incoherent, out of line with, in opposition to the clear teachings of Christ in the church, to not add to that the additional objective mortal sin of sacrilege, which is what receiving Holy Communion when you're in the state of mortal sin would entail. So it's basically an act of love and respect because it draws a clear line in the episcopal sand. You cannot do this, vote this way, and also present yourself for Holy Communion. St. Paul has very choice, blunt words in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 about people who do this unworthily. He says, if you consume the body and the blood of the Lord unworthily, you're guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord. In other words, you are participating in his murder, which is a mortal sin, obviously. So, one state, one church, two bishops, unfortunately, two rather different approaches to the serious issue of public Catholics disagreeing from Catholic teaching on something so important as the destruction of human life. Next story. Okay, so this is from Canada, from Quebec, and the gentleman on the left is Simon Jolin Barrette. He is a Quebec politician. He's young. He's in his 30s. He's the minister. Now, you have to understand that every other Canadian province has a provincial legislature. Quebec has a national assembly. So there's this nationalist spirit in Quebec. It goes to the secularist identity of Quebec as a nation. He is the minister of, get the title, Minister of Immigration, Diversity, and Inclusion. And here he is doing a kind of dance with the Premier of Quebec on the right. That's François Legault. They do this weird. I don't know, men. I don't know who does this, but I remember Father Thomas Rosica doing it with the Pope. I remember the Pope doing it with various prelates that come visit him. This weird I don't know, like they're just about to start a polka dance. Look at the guy in the background. I don't do this with other men. Do you? If you're a man listening to this Coffin Report, is this how you greet other men? In public, in restaurants, in the halls of academe, at the library, at a park? So why am I bringing this up? Well, it's another bill in Quebec called Bill 21. It's a new law in Quebec that was pushed through. They did this long marathon debate, and they pushed through this law, which will basically forbid people of religious faith, if they're public employees, so cops, government workers, teachers. Let me see, what's the category here? There's several others. State lawyers, judges, police officers, public school teachers, government employees. No crucifixes. No burqa headwear for Muslim women. No yarmulkes. I suppose they won't allow the Sikh turban either. I know there was a controversy in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They were given an exception. But this sounds pretty airtight. Now, the Catholic bishops have been sort of quiet. They issued a kind of tepid concern, quote, "We believe it's better to fight prejudices and fear for the other, in a rational way by educating people about the diversity of religious, spiritual, and cultural experiences and traditions, rather than by prohibitions." Opposition leader Pierre Arcan said that this new botched law removes rights for people. Well, definitely. Here's what a Montreal rabbi said, Lisa Grushkow. "Waking up with fewer rights for people that I love in a place that I love, it's worse than I expected. There will be lots of legal challenges." I certainly hope so. Why does Quebec want to adopt a secularist, rabidly fundamentalist, anti-religious law here? Why can't Quebecers who work for the province naturally express their faith? They're not imposing it. They're not literally a state representative in the sense of an ambassador who's trying to sell some kind of propaganda to the public. If you're pulled over by a cop in Montreal, you're not going to have a discussion. You might not even notice that he or she is wearing a cross or is a Muslim or fill in the blank. But this is one more step of Quebec stripping itself, making the public square, as Father Richard John Newhouse called, the naked public square. There's a tremendous acceptance, even in the church in Quebec, to rid the public square of any of Quebec's rich, beautiful, explicitly Catholic traditions, which are hiding in plain sight all over the province. Yes, now the bishops say they agree with the idea of promoting a secular state. I don't know why they would believe in that, but it should not be at the expense of fundamental religious rights. Well, that part is certainly true. So I could have called this the Quebec Death Watch alert, but this is where Quebec's going. In a way, they're following after the footsteps of France, who have other similar laws forbidding any kind of religious expression. And next up, of course, is nuns and religious habits, and priests, seminarians, and catholics. I'm sure that's going to come in some form or fashion. Okay, moving on. Texas. 3 stories in a row of Texas being pro-life in public. First, in Wascom, Texas, they declared themselves a sanctuary city for the unborn. Pretty brilliant co-opting of the leftist idea of a sanctuary city for an illegal alien, no matter how violent, no matter what country they're from. So we have to salute. This is a small town. It's a sort of a border town along with Louisiana. Declared itself a sanctuary city for the unborn. The ordinance was adopted in the small town of Wascom, and it classified abortion as murder and deems groups that perform and assist in obtaining abortions to be criminal organizations. Quote, here's the ordinance. This is from Wascom, Texas. The Supreme Court erred in Roe v. Wade when it said that pregnant women have a constitutional right to abort their preborn children. This is the language of the ordinance here in Wascom. There is no language anywhere in the Constitution that even remotely suggests that abortion is a constitutional right. Now, this is all a softening of the ground to re-argue Roe v. Wade, and it's coming. These states, starting with Alabama, these are all going to the Supreme Court. And I'm going to do my level best to get an interview with Justice Clarence Thomas, who's really signaled his desire to dig into the arguments that were constructed on the sand of Griswold versus Connecticut. This is the 1965 decision that I've talked about. So when Roe v. Wade met and decided its decision in 1972, 1973, that came in January 73, people like Justice Thomas really want to revisit exactly how this was argued and whether or not there is a right to privacy in the Constitution, and whether that right, even if it exists, would allow women to kill their unborn children. So, of course, the local Planned Parenthood rep is not happy with this. Interim Executive Director Diana Lamon-Marquedo. Feminists puzzle me because this woman taking her mother and father's name, Lamon and Marquedo, it's still your mother's father's name. So you're not really ahead of the game. You're sort of kicking the can down the street, seems to me. Anyway, she said that Wascom's ordinance was part of a nationwide attack on productive rights. Final quote from her. This is the Planned Parenthood representative. The intent of this local ordinance, passed by an all-male city council, is clear. Ban abortion and punish anyone who tries to access care or even help Texans considering an abortion. This is an attack on the rights of everyone who might or can get pregnant. I noticed that Ms. Lamon-Marquedo has never complained, to my knowledge, and none of them do, that the 9 justices that gave us Roe v. Wade were all male, that 90-plus doctors who perform abortions are male. Bit of a double set of standards, if you ask me. All right, so that's Wascom, Texas, the newest sanctuary city for the unborn. Texas governor, 2 stories very quickly on Texas Governor Greg Abbott. He has codified legal protection for babies born after botched abortions. That's right. Apparently, if you are in Texas and if you survive your abortion, your life might be in peril. Because remember what happened in the state of Virginia when the Virginia governor, Ralph Northam, was asked, what if the baby's abortion is survived by the baby? And this is a perinatologist doctor with lots of years' experience dealing with babies and their mothers. And he famously, infamously, notoriously said in a radio interview a few months ago that will be a decision for the mother and the doctors to whether they want to continue the care of the baby. I can just hear him with that Virginia accent. This is infanticide. So the Texas governor signed a Born Alive law protecting abortion survivors. It's called Bill HB 16, and it'll go into effect September 1st, 2019. Now, by the way, hearings for this bill went on, and they were delayed earlier this year when 4 female Democrat lawmakers, they refused to attend on the day that 2 women gave their testimonies. One is a woman named Jana Jensen, you may have heard of her, and the other is Claire Cullowell. They both survived the abortions that were attempted on them as babies. 4 Democrat women lawmakers wouldn't even show up to hear their testimony. But thanks be to God, Governor Greg Abbott has made into law protections for babies who survive after botched abortions. Finally, last Friday, he signed legislation that prohibits cities and counties from doing business with abortion providers. Man, this is like 1, 2, 3 punch. I'm not going to get into this because there's more legalese with this story, but it's basically the state of Texas is not going to allow cities and counties inside the state to officially do business that uses the state's taxpayers' money. And often Planned Parenthood will rent or lease property from the state at like $1 a year, these absurdly low amounts. And so this is all great. And Hollywood's going to have a hissy fit because one state after another, they're not going to have anywhere else to film. They're going to have to just live in the 310 or the 323 area code in Los Angeles. Those are going to be the only places left where they're going to be able to film their shows. As America wakes up to the reality of abortion and says, enough, not under our watch. And when Roe v. Wade is toppled, and I believe it will be toppled, it will be disassembled, it will be taken apart bolt by bolt and reversed, that's when the local battles begin at the state level. Do you, as a state, want to have abortion in your local area? And that attitude definitely coheres with the Catholic understanding of the principle of subsidiarity. Don't have a centralized federal control over something that's of such vital interest to the local inhabitants. Treat local areas locally and global problems globally. So that's going to come down the pike once Roe v. Wade is overturned, and then people are going to have to decide, which state do we want to live in? Abortion will probably always be legal in some parts of America. Without some great evangelical revival, I can't imagine a whirlwind where all 50 states come to their senses and repent of all the bloodshed. But we can hope the first step in that journey is to overturn Roe v. Wade. Then at least people in the state level can have a chance to do what people in Texas and their legislators, in Alabama, in Louisiana, and coming soon, Missouri and Ohio. So these are all great signs. You wouldn't have thunk it 5 years ago, right? In the midst of the Obama years where abortion was just almost like a done deal that's never going to be challenged. Now that we have a president who is explicitly pro-life, who's making pretty good picks so far for Supreme Court justices, we'll see what happens. And we'll see how hale and hearty people like Justice Thomas can remain. Meanwhile, other justices like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who have been very, very quiet lately, we'll see how the makeup of the court proceeds as we go forward in God's grace. Reserving your spot. We are extending the $100 off to join us in Germany. I've said this before. I'll say it one more time. Come to Germany with us. Father Willy Raymond, great Holy Cross priest. You're going to hear lots about Father Patrick Peyton. This is a man who gathered massive crowds, some of the world's largest crowd gatherings for his rosary crusades happened from the 40s to the 60s. This is the priest who said, famously, the family that prays together stays together. And Father Willy Raymond is the actor working with the Holy See to make Father Peyton a saint. He's got stories galore from this magnificent priest, and he's going to be celebrating Mass and hearing confessions and preaching. And we're going to have German beer, German food. We're going to learn about little Joey Ratzinger and how he became Father Joseph Ratzinger, then a professor, then an archbishop, then the Cardinal of Munich, and then the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith under John Paul II, and then Pope Benedict XVI, and now Pope Emeritus. We're going to be in his hometown. We're going to be in the church where he was baptized. We're going to learn about his call to the vocation of the priesthood, and we're going to go to Regensburg, where he gave his famous address that ticked off so many Muslims. We're going to go to Munich and Salzburg in Austria, monasteries, churches. It's going to be fantastic. We want you to come aboard. If you can, if you want to save $100, call Maeve at area code 313-565-8888, number extension 4170. Or, I think you know the link by now, patrickcoffin.media/pilgrimage. Mention the $100 off. We're extending it for Father's Day. So if you're a father, or if you know one, or you're going to be one, or you can think of one who you'd like to send with his wife, that would be fantastic. I can't wait to get there. It's May 17th through 25th. Next year, it's coming around fast. Tempest fugit. Time does fly. And so has this Coffin Report. I'm Patrick Coffin. See you real soon. Be a saint. What else is there?